The British Isles have always been considered lands filled with enormous mysteries. Before the arrival of the Romans, they were even considered magical. But after Roman rule over much of the territory, many things began to change. The culture of the Latins began to spread, and the belief in a monotheistic religion, where one god rules sovereignly over the universe, spread throughout Brittany. But the influence of the ancient gods of Brittany had not left the land, and their most fervent believers and priests were considered to possess supernatural powers. But Rome's hegemony over the islands had come to an end. The great empire fell, and a dark period began in England. The lands were subjugated to greed and the thirst for power. Brothers fought against brothers in a never-ending war for dominance of the Isles. The cities, glorious in the past, became decadent after the demise of the Romans. The invasion of England by the barbarian tribes of Angles and Saxons seemed a clear sign that God had abandoned those lands. But it had been prophesied that the return of two brothers would again give light to those lands. They were Ambrosius and Uther Pendragon. The brothers fought against the fierce Saxon barbarians and the tyranny of Vortigern. On the battlefields, they regained the right to the crown of Brittany. Ambrosius's reign was short, and his younger brother dictated the fate of the land. Uther Pendragon was recognized as a brave warrior, but not all nobles fully recognized his authority. For several years, Uther warred against the Saxons and increased his kingdom through conquests. The hard heart of the King of Brittany, who had never experienced the pain of passion, was about to be shuddered by an unexpected visit. Along with her husband, Duke Gorlois of Cornwall, entered the room the Duchess Igraine, the most beautiful woman Uther had ever seen. The Duke introduced his wife to the sovereign. Igraine seemed to come from the mystical Avalon, a land where magic still held much power. During the reception hosted by the king, the Duke of Cornwall realized that the king's intentions towards his wife were not the best. Igraine told her husband that the king had made her an indecent proposal. The Duke was furious, but he managed to control his anger until the end of the reception. At dawn, the Duke and his wife left the royal castle quickly, without saying goodbye. But one of Uther's guards, who had witnessed the visitor's departure, quickly told the king of the episode. The king was furious and ordered a messenger to go after the Duke to deliver him a letter of royal summons. The message said that the Duke and Duchess would have to present themselves immediately before the king. Uther knew that it was inexcusable duty of his vassal to attend the summons of his king, and refusal of such a duty could be considered an act of treason. But the Duke knew that the king's real intention was to seduce his wife. For this reason, he told the messenger that he would not return to the castle with her, for he had an urgent business that required his attention. Overwhelmed by passionate rage, the king ordered his army to be assembled to march to Cornwall and teach the rebellious Duke a lesson. The Duke of Cornwall ordered his fortress to be reinforced in preparation for war. The armies of the Duke and Uther met on the battlefield, but the outcome was inconclusive. The Duke chose to defend himself inside his castle, as he thought that the king lacked the necessary strength for a successful siege. Uther besieged the fortress of Tintagel, where Duke Gorlois and Igraine were taking refuge. The siege had been going on for a long time, and did not seem close to an end, as the Duke had managed to accumulate many supplies before the arrival of the royal troops. The king was obsessed with Igraine. That long siege did not seem to positively contribute to Uther's mental health. With no other way out, Uther called Sir Ulfius, the king's right-hand man, and said, "There is only one man who can end my affliction, and you know who he is." "My king, we have no need of that devil-worshipper. You are the rightful king of Brittany, anointed by God." "Yes, I know who I am, but I believe that God is not very inclined to help one of his chosen ones disrespect one of the 10 Commandments." Disgruntled, Ulfius headed galloping off to the Welsh lands to recruit the king's old friend.
"Who is there?"
"Sir Ulfius, by order of King Uther."
"What took you so long? I've been ready for hours."
"You swindler! You don't impress me by pretending you were already waiting for me."
"Don't be an imbecile, Ulfius. I have been waiting for years for the true calling of Albion Island."
The king was heartened to see Ulfius approaching with his friend.
"Merlin, my old friend, I thought I would never see that wrinkled face of yours again."
"Your gray hairs show that you too are not rejuvenating." Uther told Merlin that he had been upset ever since he had met the Duchess Igraine, and did not know where to turn, for that uncomfortable desire was consuming him from within.
"I know how to get you to unite with the beautiful Igraine, but it will come at a cost."
"I will pay whatever it takes to have just one night with that incredible woman."
"I will do as you ask, but this union will result in the birth of a child that you must hand to me."
"Would you sacrifice the child in one of your rituals?"
"Of course not. Your Majesty has been spending too much time with that simpleton Sir Ulfius. By the way, we need him here. He will play an important part in our plan."
With dusk, Sir Ulfius ordered the siege of the fortress of Tintagel to be lifted, and the men to return home. From high on the wall, the Duke of Cornwall sensed that Uther's army was showing weakness, and ordered his men to prepare for the attack. Gorloy and his knights left the fortress to crush Uther's retreating forces. Meanwhile, Uther and Merlin waited in hiding for the Duke's departure.
"The time has come."
Merlin threw his cloak away and began his ritual. Uther felt both fascination and fear as he watched that powerful druid invoke the forces of nature and ancestry. Merlin withdrew a powder from one of his pouches he had around his waist and threw it at the king. When the cloud of dust cleared, Uther had assumed the body form of the Duke of Cornwall. The king rode to the Duke's fortress.
"The Duke is back! Open the gates!"
Uther's disguise seemed perfect. He ordered his horse to keep ready, for he would not be long. The king went upstairs to the Duchess's room, where Igraine was standing with her daughter Morgana on her lap. The little girl ran to embrace her supposed father.
"Daddy is back!"
Uther avoided the child.
"Leave the room, child."
Morgana was taken from the room by one of Igraine's maids, but the girl sensed something very wrong. Uther approached his beloved, who was surprised to see the lustful look on her husband's face. The king possessed Igraine and unleashed all his passion. The loving couple awoke to Morgana's cries.
"Daddy is dead! Daddy is dead!"
Igraine ran to help her daughter, and Uther took the opportunity to leave the castle. The king left the fortress before dawn, and the Duke's army quickly returned.
"Daddy is dead!"
"Calm down, my child. It's all right." As the army approached, Igraine saw her husband's body carried by his men. Igraine ran to see what was happening.
"My condolences, madam. He died fighting bravely."
"But how?"
"The retreat of Uther's men was a trap. We were ambushed during the night by hundreds of archers."
"That's impossible. He visited me tonight."
"Surely it was his spirit, wanting to bid farewell to his beloved."
Igraine was comforted by her ladies-in-waiting and led to her room. Uther quickly led his army to the fortress of Tintagel to negotiate terms of peace. The Duchess and her 3 bereaved daughters received the king. Little Morgana stared at Uther with a gaze filled with the purest hatred.
"I want to seal a lasting peace between our families. Through marriage, we will form an indissoluble alliance. In this way, your family's rights will be preserved."
A few days later, the marriage was celebrated between Uther and Igraine. During their wedding night, she revealed to the king that she was pregnant.
"And whose child is this? The Duke's?"
"I thought so, but I don't know anymore. He did not visit my room for months. But on the night of his death, I was visited by his spirit." Uther felt relieved to know that his wife's child was his own. The child was born, He was a beautiful, healthy boy. But Merlin soon appeared at Tintagel Castle to fetch what he had been promised.
"The time has come, my king. Deliver me the child as promised."
Uther snatched the child from the arms of the mother, who tried to resist.
"Give me back my boy!"
Uther handed the boy to Merlin.
"Do not hand your son over to this monster, my lord, I beg you. He is the sole heir to the throne of Brittany."
"I made a promise to this man, and the time has come to keep it."
"Have you got eyes, Sir Ulfius?"
"These eyes have seen dozens of wizards like you end up on the edge of the sword of men of God."
"Is that so? Then perhaps you are not as useless as I thought. Come with me. We must secure the future of the islands."
Merlin and Sir Ulfius rode together to the lands of a noble knight known as Sir Ector. Merlin handed the child to the knight and asked him to raise the child as an adopted son. "Take good care of the child, Sir Ector. The fate of our kingdoms is in your hands." Merlin and Sir Ulfius departed and left the child in the care of an honorable knight, who would have much to teach the boy, who would become known as Arthur. Uther Pendragon, the king of the Britons, had given his firstborn son to Merlin. With his succession assured, Uther wanted to consolidate his reign. The king wanted to fulfill the prophecy that Merlin had once told him. This prophecy revealed that a great king would arise, uniting all the lands under a single monarch, who would bring peace and prosperity to the Isle of Brittany. Uther needed courageous allies to be that king. For this mission, he gathered the best and noblest warriors in Brittany. Merlin guided the king to a region where there was an exotic geological formation by the sea.
The ancients said that the gods had established here the foundations of the kingdom that would bring light to Brittany.
"Upon these strong foundations I will erect the capital of my kingdom. This fortress shall be known as Camelot." To bring this colossal work to fruition, the king required his vassals to contribute a large sum of resources and labor. The construction of the most splendid fortress progressed at a good pace, but even so, it would take several years to complete the castle. But many were not satisfied with the construction of the palace. Some nobles did not want to pay those tributes, and the clergy hated the idea of a new capital being erected in a place so sacred to the pagan Celts. Besides internal conflicts, the threat of Saxon invaders destabilized Uther's government. The king summoned the armies of his vassals to fight the invaders. He did not suspect that some were plotting against their lord. Together with his council of war, Uther set the strategy for the great battle that would take place the next day. He knew that the Saxons were brave warriors. Therefore, using only brute force would not be the best strategy. The next day, Uther positioned himself at the vanguard of his army to lead the attack against the Saxon lines. Realizing the king's vulnerability, the Saxon leader ordered an all-out assault by his army. After all, if Uther fell, all of Britain would collapse as well. Uther realized that his enemy had taken the bait and instructed his aide to order troops hidden in a nearby grove to attack the flanks of their opponents. The king, in shock, was slow to realize why his vassals did not attack. Uther had been betrayed. Even outnumbered, the king and his men fought with incredible bravery. Uther was gravely wounded in battle, but even that did not make him stop fighting. The chief of the Saxon warriors realized that, to defeat his opponent, he would have to sacrifice a large part of his army. After all, the Bretons, like hunted beasts, fought with remarkable ferocity. He therefore ordered a strategic retreat, allowing the army to preserve energy to fight another day. The Bretons celebrated the victory, not realizing that it was a true Pyrrhic victory.
"Bring me the royal sword! Attack!"
Realizing the king's vulnerability, the traitorous nobles decided to remove him from the throne.
"Flee, my lord! We will cover your retreat!"
The king tried to reach London, but his wounds were shedding blood, and his enemies were pursuing him. Without strength, The king fell from his horse. Uther felt the life leave his body when he heard Merlin's voice.
Protect your sword, for the fate of all England depends on it.
Uther used all the strength he had left to raise his sword and stick it into a stone.
You will never have this sword, and without it, you will never
sit on my throne. Many tried to pull the sword from the stone, but they said that only the true king could remove it. Those who tried to usurp the throne of Brittany ended up murdered by their rivals. For many years, the sword of Brittany waited for the true king. Many years had passed since the fall of Uther Pendragon, and the throne of Brittany remained vacant. Just after Christmas, all the nobles of the region were summoned by the Archbishop of London to praise God. But most were more interested in the tournaments and the disputes between knights, the festivities after the religious events. The best knights from the island of Brittany attended the tournament. Among them were Sir Ector, his son Sir Kay, and his young adopted son Arthur, his brother's squire. The knights with the best performance in the games could try to remove the Brittany sword, which was still attached to the rock. If anyone succeeded, that person would be considered the new king of Brittany. The novice knights fought each other in sword dueling tournaments, which were less prestigious than jousting. But in these contests, they amassed prestige to one day gain access to the First League. During the tournament, the blade of Sir Kay's sword broke.
Arthur, run to our tent and get me my spare sword before I am disqualified.
The young squire ran at full speed to the camp, and on the way found the sword of Brittany carved into stone. He did not know the history of the sword and went on his way. Inside the tent, Arthur searched for the spare sword, but he only found the sheath already swordless. He had forgotten the sword at home. But the boy remembered the sword he had found on the way. He ran to the sword, not realizing that he was being watched. Not knowing that this was his father's sword and that it was stuck in the rock, Arthur tried to pull it out. He pulled the sword out of the rock with ease and was amazed at the quality of the weapon. But he had no time to waste and ran to the tournament. Arthur handed the sword to his brother.
Finally! I didn't think you would be back.
Sir Kay was amazed when he saw the royal seal on the blade of the sword.
You must return to the arena now, or you will be disqualified. Look, he has the sword of Brittany.
Sir Kay was surrounded by curious onlookers who couldn't believe their eyes.
How did you get this sword?
I took it from the stone, and therefore I am the new king of Brittany.
It was then that Sir Ector appeared, together with the Archbishop of London.
Do you swear in the name of God that it was you who removed the sword from the stone?
Sir Kay was embarrassed and could not lie in front of his father and the Archbishop.
I did not tell the truth. It was Arthur who removed the sword.
Most of the knights could not believe that the boy could have pulled that off, and asked him to prove what he had done. Arthur put the sword back in the rock. A huge knight pushed the boy and tried to remove the sword from the rock. He exerted enormous force, but could not move the sword. A line of knights formed, and they all tried to remove the sword, but without success.
Let the boy try again.
The knights were surprised by the arrival of the famous Celtic wizard.
What is the son of the devil doing here?
Ah! If I earned a coin every time I heard that, I'd be the richest man in Brittany.
The people started shouting for them to let the boy try to remove the sword. With no alternative, they let the boy try again. Arthur removed the sword from the stone with ease, to the amazement of everyone present.
Just because he took the sword out, that doesn't mean he has a right to the throne.
His right does not come from the fact that he drew an old sword from a stone. His right is in his blood. He is the firstborn son of Uther Pendragon.
What nonsense! Your words have no value here. But mine do. Although I don't like this crazy old man, what he says is true. I was there when Merlin delivered the king's son to Sir Ector."
Sir Ulfius was considered one of the most respectable knights in those lands, and everyone knew him for being the right-hand man of the posthumous King Uther. Sir Ector approached Arthur, with some incredulity in his gaze.
"When Merlin put you in my arms, I immediately called you my son. It is with great honor that I now call you my king."
The knights, clergy, and commoners knelt before the young king, who had not yet realized what was happening. On the day of Pentecost, Arthur was crowned King of Brittany by the Archbishop of London. The young king was cheered by the nobles, who shouted, "Long live the king!" Arthur appointed Sir Ulfius as his right hand, and Merlin was ever present as his advisor. And so began the reign of King Arthur. After ascending to the throne of Brittany, Arthur, as had happened to his father, faced strong opposition from the nobles of the region. Many disputed his right to the throne and considered him a bastard. Others refused to kneel before a boy who was barely out of diapers. Arthur also had allies. However, it would be necessary to attract even more nobles to his cause, allowing the kingdom to be pacified. "Sir Ulfius, I know that my father had a strong friendship with the kings living on the continent."
"No doubt, sire. Your father knew the importance of having a true friend in times of need."
"We must re-establish bonds of friendship with these kings. United, our kingdoms will be stronger against our enemies. I am counting on your expertise to lead a delegation on my behalf, which will seek to establish a defensive alliance between our kingdoms."
"It shall be so, Your Majesty."
Ulfius crossed the channel to meet with King Bors of Gaul and his brother, King Ban of Benwick, a land known as Little Britain. Ban gladly received the offer of an alliance with Arthur, for his wife was pregnant, and the king wanted his future son to inherit a strong and secure kingdom. His son would be the most celebrated knight in history, known as Lancelot. With the reinforced armies of his allies, Arthur fought the revolting nobles and beat his opponents, pacifying Brittany. With much of his enemies now defeated, Arthur consolidated himself on the Breton throne. A new era of prosperity was born in England. Advised by Merlin, Arthur ordered the resumption of construction of the citadel of Camelot, one of King Uther Pendragon's dreams. The construction of the city required much sweat and tears, but it began a new golden age in England. Prosperity spread throughout Brittany, and Arthur became beloved by the people. The civil war between rebellious nobles and the rightful king of Brittany increased the number of knights on the march. Noble warriors without lords or banished warlords wandered around England aimlessly and without purpose. With nothing to lose, these knights were dangerous men. Arthur was riding with Merlin by his side, discussing the fate of Britain, when they spotted a knight in distress. It was Sir Griflet, Arthur's newest knight, tasked with eliminating a walking knight causing trouble in the area. The young man was gravely wounded and could barely support himself on his horse. "My God, who did that to you?"
"It was an extraordinarily strong wandering knight in armor, black as night. He refuses to give way to anyone who intends to cross the woods he protects."
"Merlin, do you know who this man is who dares attack one of my knights?"
In these lands, I believe that only a man of that description would have such audacity. Pellinore. He is now a landless nobleman, but was once a king. But even ruined, he is still a great and dangerous warrior.
"I will take care of him. Stay here and look after Sir Griflet." Arthur rode off toward the woods, ignoring Merlin's advice not to face the Black Knight. Inside the woods, Arthur was impressed by the various shields hanging from the tree branches. In the coat of arms, he recognized the weapons of some experienced and valiant knights, all defeated by Pellinore. At the end of the corridor of intimidating shields stood the Black Knight, a clearly imposing figure.
This path is closed. Turn around or you will regret it.
Arthur, at that moment, had no insignia identifying him as king. He found this beneficial, as he could gauge people's character without them being intimidated by his title. I am here to avenge Sir Griflet and free this passage once and for all.
So be it, but don't think you will have the same luck as your friend, for you will not escape from here alive.
The two knights violently clashed their spears on their opponent's shield.
Finally, a worthy opponent. I was tired of taking down knights who would barely serve as squires.
They attacked each other again, and stalemate prevailed. Arthur was already a knight with some experience, but he had never faced such a skilled opponent, and he was motivated by his performance up to that point, which boosted his confidence. In the third confrontation, the Black Knight's spear found a gap in Arthur's armor and struck him in the shoulder.
You look like one of those knights who surrenders right after the first superficial wound.
With his pride wounded, Arthur's blood boiled, and he took up the royal sword. The sword duel was violent, but despite being wounded, Arthur was fighting very bravely against a stronger opponent. Pellinore landed a powerful blow that broke the king's sword. The movement was only interrupted when it hit Arthur's helmet. He fell off his horse, but one of his feet remained attached to the stirrup. The horse started to run and dragged the king out of the forest. The wounded Arthur collapsed, and his fate seemed uncertain. When he regained his senses, he saw the image of the most beautiful young woman he had ever met. He thought she was an angel, for he thought he had died and was in heaven.
Are you an angel? Your time has not yet come. My name is Lady Guinevere, daughter of Leodegrance.
Far away, the Black Knight returned to his cabin in the forest, where he protected what he considered to be his greatest treasure. There was his wife and his youngest son. The boy had been touched by the Holy Spirit and would one day be the knight known as Percival. Arthur finally recovered from the injuries caused by the Black Knight, but great sorrow fell upon the king, for the royal sword had become broken and lost. Without the glorious sword of Brittany, he feared that his throne would be further challenged.
Don't worry, Your Majesty. Good may come out of evil.
What good can come after such a great loss?
The sword of Britain has fulfilled its role and brought you here, but now we will go in search of the sword that will lead you to greatness.
Arthur and Merlin set off in search of the weapon that would change the lands of England forever. They arrived at the shores of a lake covered by mists. Merlin opened his arms and began to chant in the language of the ancient peoples of Brittany. Impressed, Arthur felt the wind getting stronger and stronger as Merlin sang. The gust of wind Merlin caused forced the mists to dissipate, revealing an unusual scene. In the middle of the lake, a female hand was holding a sword just above the water level. Whose arm is that, holding such a wonderful sword?
She is one of the ladies of the Lake of Avalon, women gifted with the magic of the ancient peoples.
Isn't the legendary citadel of Avalon just a legend?
That's what priests and bishops want people to think.
Finally, Merlin. I thought this day would never come.
Hello, Vivain.
Who are you? I feel as if you are from another world. I am Vivain, Lady of Avalon, and leader of the Ladies of the Lake. Despite our differences, we share the same world. With your help, I hope we will continue to share it. My wish is only to ensure the peace of all the peoples of Great Albion. Your intention seems sincere, and that is why you will have Avalon on your side. Look at this sword. Its name is Excalibur. Its destiny is to belong to the man who will bring a golden age to all Brittany. If you think you are this man, row to the Lady of the Lake, and she will judge you to see if you are worthy to have the sword. If you are not, she will take you to the bottom of the lake, where you will perish." Arthur bravely pushed the boat back into the water and began rowing toward the sword. Arthur stretched out on the bow, attempting to reach the sword. But just as he managed to grab it, the lady gripped his wrist tightly, and her eyes glowed frighteningly like embers. She pulled him under the water and said to him, "Make yourself worthy of that sword." Arthur, frightened and drenched, returned to the surface with the sword in his arms. The king took the sword out of its sheath and felt an immense power, something he had never felt in his life. "I hope you are right about this new pupil of yours, for the fate of all Brittany will be in his hands." When Arthur returned to the riverbank, the fairy Vivain had already left.
"And now, my king, what shall we do?"
"Now the time has come for my revenge." Arthur and Merlin rode again to the forest of the Black Knight. Arthur got down from his horse and challenged the Black Knight to a sword duel, since the king had no spear for jousting. Pellinore was known as one of the best swordsmen in the region and gladly accepted the challenge. The fight began, and Arthur fought with great courage and confidence. This was amazing, considering the last duel between them, where he was almost killed by his opponent. With one strong blow, Arthur knocked the knight's sword out of his hand. Disarmed and powerless, the knight had no choice but to surrender. "I don't know where you got that magnificent weapon. With it you look like a new man. I am Pellinore, the dethroned king of Listinois. If you spare my life, I swear that my family and I will be loyal to you." "I know that you have rebelled against me in the past, but my kingdom is now entering a new cycle, where unity will give way to division. So, it will be an honor to have such an experienced knight at my side." After reconciling with King Pellinore, Arthur and Merlin decided to return home.
"What do you think of your new sword?"
"It is simply magnificent."
"But tell me, do you like the sword better or the sheath?"
"The sheath is beautiful, but obviously I like the sword better. It is much more valuable."
"You are wrong. Although it is a superb sword, the sheath is even more valuable."
"How can it be more valuable than the sword?"
"This sheath is enchanted, and he who has it will never die in combat. Even if you are seriously wounded, you will not die. Take good care of this sheath, for your life will be safe as long as you have it."
Arthur and Merlin arrived in Camelot, and their army was ready by order of Sir Ulfius. One of his allies was in danger, and only Arthur could save him from his enemies. The small kingdom of Camelot, a historical ally of the Pendragon family, was in trouble. King Leodegrance had no male heir. Thus, whoever married his daughter Guinevere would be heir to the title of Camelot. Welsh nobles and the Duke of Northumbria had an interest in a union between Lady Guinevere and the Duke to consolidate the power of this coalition in the region. With the support of King Rhys, the Duke of Northumbria gave the king an ultimatum. Either he delivered his daughter, or the fortress would be reduced to dust, and his subjects would be sold into slavery. Leodegrance prayed to the heavens, for his few soldiers could hardly contain an assault on the fortress. His only hope was the distress call sent to King Arthur. The King of the Britons and his men marched quickly to Camelot, for Arthur would never deny helping an ally in a time of need. The coalition of Leodogrance's enemies was surprised by the arrival of Arthur and his men. The northern enemies proved to be valiant, but unable to hold back the royal army and its incredible knights. After easily defeating the first wave of enemies, King Arthur wanted to negotiate. "I know that your men are sons of the same land that gave birth to my soldiers, and that the sons of Brittany do not run away from the fight when it is necessary. But there is no need to stain the sacred soil of Brittany with the blood of hundreds of your sons. The champions of both can fight in a singular duel to reveal the true will of God." The Duke was pleased with that proposal, for he was an experienced warrior and the northern champion in jousting, and he accepted the duel readily. The Princess of Camelot beckoned to her champion, asking him to come forward. As Arthur approached the young lady, he recognized her beautiful features. How could he forget the beautiful features of the young lady who had saved his life days ago? Guinevere tied her handkerchief to the tip of Arthur's spear and wished him good luck for the clash. The two knights took up their positions and spurred their horses toward each other. A great bang was heard as the two spears collided. Due to the heavy impact, the Duke fell from his saddle and crashed terribly against the ground. Arthur got down from his horse and knelt beside the Duke, who was giving his last breaths while choking on his own blood in his throat. The king raised Guinevere's handkerchief, announcing his victory against the enemy, and the invading armies turned around and returned home. Arthur apologized for returning the princess her handkerchief in a sorry state, but thanked her for the good fortune of her talisman. King Leodegrance did not hold back and gave his savior a strong hug and promised to give him any reward he wished. "I apologize in advance, for what my heart most longs for is the same thing those rude villains wanted, the hand of the most beautiful princess this land has ever seen."
Not since the times of the great warriors like Achilles has there been a woman capable of winning so many hearts, and with the potential to generate so much discord. And so, as proposed in Homer's book, there is no better man than His Majesty to marry our Helen of Brittany. After all, no man will revolt against you in search of the love of Guinevere, your future queen."
After promising his daughter to King Arthur, a splendid surprise was around the corner.
"Do you know what that is?"
A table?
"Yes, but not just any table. This table symbolizes a dream your father had. Around this table will sit the best knights of this kingdom, and, under the command of the king, they will try to lead the kingdom of Brittany into an age of gold, where justice, kindness, and peace will prevail."
Arthur marveled at his late father's dream, and even vowed that he would make that dream a reality. Arthur said goodbye to his bride and future father-in-law, saying that he would meet them again at his new castle next summer, where the royal wedding would be celebrated. Summer had finally arrived. After decades of hard work, the citadel of Camelot was finally built. The splendor of that city was like a beacon for all Brittany, a symbol of honor, justice, and compassion. The men of Brittany would achieve unimaginable things. That was undoubtedly a rare jewel in a world covered by darkness and corruption. The city was crowded. For that day, the long-awaited marriage between King Arthur and Princess Guinevere of Camelot would be celebrated. Seeing his future queen enter the church, Arthur had no doubt that he had married the most beautiful woman in the world. All the guests were delighted to see the bride in the bridal pageant. Except Merlin, who sensed that such a beautiful bride could ruin the kingdom. The couple made their vows in front of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the kingdom of Brittany was left with a new queen. Arthur's subjects thrilled at their beautiful new queen, and they pronounced good wishes to the royal couple, wishing them health and that an heir to the throne of Brittany. It was a weekend full of celebrations, with parties in the streets, palace banquets, and tournaments. That same weekend, Arthur appointed the knights who would sit on the round table. Among them were his father-in-law, Leodegrance, his marshal, Sir Ulfius, his brood brother, Sir Kay, his nephew and bridal tournament champion, Sir Gawain, and many other distinguished knights. At this headless table, they would sit as equals and swear to be right in their actions, just and brave in times of war or peace. They were to be an example to other knights and to common men. These men would ride all over the island of Brittany, taking on evildoers, protecting the defenseless, and bringing justice to those lands. Their important conquests were a source of glory, and the golden age of those people, promised by the king, seemed to be near. The greatest desire of any knight in that land was, through his courageous deeds, to become a knight of the Round Table, sitting at the side of Arthur and his magnificent warriors. After the Order of the Knights of the Round Table was formed, it took a few years before a knight emerged who was different from the rest. His name was Lancelot, and his arrival would forever change the fate of Arthur's kingdom. When the young King Arthur took power, he was confronted with much internal dissent. Several nobles would rise up against him. But Arthur also had allies. King Ban of Benwick was one of them, and thanks to his help, Arthur succeeded in pacifying his kingdom. Back in his kingdom, which lay across the English Channel, King Ban would meet his youngest son, who had been born during his absence. He would be christened Galahad, but would go down in history with the nickname Lancelot. King Ban would soon find himself in serious trouble. There was a Frankish king named Claudius, whose expansionist ambitions and tyranny would make him a dangerous enemy of King Ban and his brother Bors. War was inevitable. The brother kings would lead their troops to engage King Claudius's large army that was stationed in the region of Gaul. Ban and Bor counted on the help of their young sons who had just been knighted, Sir Lionel and Sir Bors the Younger. A major battle ensued, and Arthur's allies would obtain a Cadmean victory. Despite winning the bout, the king's army had been all but destroyed. Additionally, King Bors would perish in battle, and the young knights Lionel and Bors were captured. King Ban returned to his fortress with the rest of his men, knowing that Claudius, despite his defeat, still had plenty of men in reserve. It would not be long before he would lay siege to his fortress. Ban understood that his fortress could hold out for a long time. Its fall would be inevitable. But Ban still had one last alternative.
"My dear, we must leave for Arthur's lands, where you and little Galahad will be safe. With the help of Arthur's army, we will drive Claudius's men from our lands."
Before the enemy army surrounded their fortress, King Ban, his wife Elaine, and their baby managed to escape. As they drove through a dense forest, Ban, who was a Christian, yet still attached to the old Breton gods, asked those to protect them during this dangerous journey. Ban was then hit by a projectile that knocked him off his horse.
"This time you won't escape, noble King Ban."
That was Claudius rejoicing his victory over his enemy. Ban cried out for his wife to flee and save his son's life. Elaine quickly galloped to the shores of a lake, but she knew she was being pursued. Her horse got bogged down in the mud and she could no longer advance, while Claudius's minions came closer. This was when, from the midst of the waters, a beautiful and noble figure emerged. It introduced itself as Vivian, the Lady of the Lake, and asked the queen to hand the child to her. She unbelievably walked on the mud without sinking. The Lady of the Lake had to push hard to separate the child from the mother's arms, who resisted and wept. With the child in her arms, who smiled at the Fairy of Avalon, She said that from that day forward, he would be known as Lancelot of the Lake. King Ban would be killed by Claudius, who usurped his throne. Elaine would join a monastery to wait for Vivien's promise to be fulfilled. As an adult, her son would return as a great knight and take back all that was rightfully his. After rescuing King Ban of Benwick's son from a dreadful fate, the Lady of the Lake took the child to Avalon, a mythical land whose ancient magic was still very much present. It was a beautiful spot embraced by nature, but apart from those who lived there, its location was entirely unknown. There lived the fairies of the lake, women gifted with extraordinary powers. Vivien knew that the baby's destiny was enormous and that his name would be sung all over the world. In the land of the ladies of the lake, he would be renamed Lancelot of the Lake. Morgana, King Arthur's half-sister, also lived in Avalon. She was being trained to become the future sovereign of Avalon. Morgana was astounded by the vital power emanating from the child. Lancelot was raised in that magical land and had a somewhat unique childhood. However, when he was around 10 years old, he was presented with his new guardian. His name was Sir Pelleas. He was one of King Arthur's best knights, saved by the Lady of the Lake when he had been mortally wounded. To prevent his death, Vivien took him to Avalon. Pelleas was a wonderful teacher and an accomplished fencer. He trained Lancelot to master different weapons. He also prepared the boy to master the arts of horsemanship and dueling. His student proved to be an exemplary learner, repeating each exercise until he reached perfection. Before long, the pupil had eclipsed his master. Sir Pelleas was proud to see this little boy develop into a magnificent knight. Lancelot was only 17 when he was gifted by the Lady of the Lake with beautiful, shining silver armor. "Lancelot, it is time for you to chart your own path. You must return to the land of the Bretons, and there you will not have to say your name, for soon everyone will know you for the deeds you undertake. Thank you for everything. I will bear the name of the lake with my own, and all the glory that shall come my way will be passed on to the people of Avalon." Lancelot left the fairyland behind, but carried with him a legacy of noble lessons handed to him by his masters. The Avalon Kingdom would never cease to be in his heart. King Arthur and some of his knights were crossing the land after putting down a criminal gang that was plaguing the region. The knights escorting the king included Sir Bedivere and Sir Gawain. But they ran into Lancelot riding from the opposite direction. "Hold here while I clear the way." "Make way, boy, or I'll have to take you by force." "Boy? If they still refer to me as a boy, perhaps striking another knight will help me get recognized next time." "Don't say I didn't warn you." The two knights charged at each other. Lancelot's powerful attack swept Sir Gawain off his saddle, and he rolled in the grass. Arthur was surprised by Lancelot's skill, as Sir Gawain was a multiple jousting champion. "Knight, are you as good with the sword as you are with a javelin?" My modesty would require me to say no, but in that case I'd be violating the truth. "Then let's duel." "Are you sure about that, my lord?" "Do not worry. I want to see what this boy is capable of." Arthur and Lancelot faced and studied each other carefully before going on the attack. Their swords clashed, and they both proved to be extremely proficient with the blade. "You are exceptionally good, my lord, but age is already affecting your speed." "Age? You cheeky boy." The taunts of the young Lancelot upset the king, and he started attacking out of anger. His reckless strikes gave the young knight opportunities he could not ignore. "Congratulations, young knight! The victory is yours." When Lancelot looked more closely at Arthur's sword, he recognized Excalibur, the magic sword kept by the ladies of the lake. "This is Excalibur! Then you are the king!" "What is your name? And how did you recognize this sword? Have you seen it before?" "My name is Lancelot of the Lake, and I first saw this sword in Avalon when I was a child." Arthur was glad to learn of the knight's background. He invited him to join his round table, as the king had never met a knight with such abilities. Lancelot was taken to Camelot, where he was made a knight of the Order of the Round Table. Arthur introduced him to his queen. And when the eyes of Guinevere and the knight met, they were entranced by each other. Lancelot was young and handsome, while the queen was the most beautiful woman Lancelot had ever seen. Making use of his glorious sword, Arthur consecrated Sir Lancelot of the Lake as his newest knight. But before he could take his place at the Round Table, Sir Lancelot set off in search of fame, making his name known throughout Arthur's kingdom.